Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2020 Winter Sports Parent-Student Activities Meeting. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity for us to be able to go over our program expectations, protocols, as we are very excited to be able to have the opportunity to have winter sports. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of tonight's meeting, I want to make sure and give some introductions. It's very important that I thank our leadership team as we went through the fall season. I found a great support in being able to have these people help us out, and particularly our leadership team with our building principal, Mrs. Fletcher, Mr. and Mrs. Supez, assistant principals, as well as Mrs. Downs, that helped out with a lot of the activities. As we go through the winter season, we'll have the same kind of support, and we're looking forward to that. Also, I want to make sure and thank Mrs. McGovern, our superintendent, as well as Mrs. Bolton, human resource directors, for being able to establish protocols so that we can have and look forward to having a winter season. With that being said, we also have our winter sports head coaches. I want to make sure and introduce these people. As we get through this meeting, they will go ahead and schedule virtual meetings with each of the programs. That communication will come through either their sport Facebook page or through Parent Square. So please be looking forward to getting that information soon. For our boys basketball, our head coach is Jeremy Main. New this year with our boys swimming and diving is Elizabeth Mann. So please welcome her. Girls basketball is Ramiro Candelaria. Important note that indoor track will be determined. Mr. DeCray has resigned. He decided to step down. Want to thank him for all of his years of service and look forward to seeing who our new candidate's going to be when we go through that process. Finally, wrestling with Brad Provisor. Some of our support staff, these are the people that really kind of put everything together and make sure that it goes smoothly. I can't say enough about our activities secretary, Mrs. Duchamp. This year has been a challenging year, without a doubt, with regard to COVID. And Mrs. Duchamp has done a wonderful job of being able to take on all of those structures and keep them moving. Our athletic trainer, Mrs. Wiseman, she's kind of the nuts and bolts of making sure that our athletes stay healthy and are able to continue to compete each week. She does a wonderful job. I think the nice thing that I see about her is she always identifies the difference between somebody who is injured and somebody who is hurt, and make sure no matter what that they're safe and they're able to perform on a weekly basis. Our teachers, obviously all of the efforts and time that they put into them to make sure that they're prepared. Our transportation staff, to and from activities. We know that there's travel involved in the state of Wyoming, and at any moment's notice, they sometimes make changes. Greatly appreciate and thank them for their support. Our maintenance staff and activities crew, this year with regard to COVID, it has been a challenge to be able to make sure that we have our events ready to go. I want to make sure and thank them for what they do and look forward to their continued support with our winter sports and activities. Parents, thank you for allowing your son and daughter to be a part of Rock Springs High School athletics and activities. It's a pivotal point and pivotal piece to their growth and development, and we want to make sure and thank you for that. Without a doubt, our coaches, it's very important to understand the hours and the time that they have put in to make sure that these student athletes are not only prepared but safe. Their dedication goes without saying, but needs to be recognized, the time and effort that they put into it. Finally, are the wives and husbands of these coaches. Like I said, the time and the effort that they have put into it, time away from home, is very, very, I guess, not recognized very well. And so every chance that we get, I want to make sure that we please thank them. So what's new for 2020? Obviously, with COVID-19, I want to make sure that we understand that we're going to make sure and abide by all state and local officials, health officials, the Wyoming High School Activities Association, as well as the school district's expectations in regarding making sure that our students are staying safe or prepared to play and meeting those protocols in regard to anything on attending events, transportation, game participation, overnight stays, Obviously, with our face mask and hygiene requirements, there are new expectations with those, and those will be communicated out very soon. Eligibility, and then making sure that they follow through on their temperature checks. Please note that as protocols adjust or change throughout the process, we will make sure and notify all active and notified people, and we'll go ahead and follow those diligently. Our athletic philosophy and goals. Bottom line is we want student athletes to be involved in as many activities and sports as possible. We feel that this enriches their growth and development, not only from a physical standpoint, but also from a social and academic standpoint. So we want our student athletes to please get them involved, maintain a season, stick through the season, and understand some of the things that are important through life, such as discipline, work ethic, teamwork, sportsmanship, responsibility and accountability for others, dealing with adversity, and understanding persistence and commitment, and then being able to have a positive mental and physical well-being throughout. With part of that, we also understand that one of the most important pieces towards their success in athletics is being involved in a strength conditioning program. This particular slide here, although quite detailed, the important thing to understand is they need to be involved in a strength conditioning program, and more importantly, at a young age. You'll notice here on this slide, it talks about the age groups that are broken up, how they should be involved in strength and conditioning, some types of sports performance, learning to train, and then finally being able to train to compete. It's very, very important that we understand that this is a vital piece towards their success, and most importantly, for injury prevention and safety of our athletes while they're competing. So the old saying of, oh, I don't want to be in there, it may affect my performance. That's very, very old research. It's clear that this is a very important piece towards their success. And, I've said this 1,000 times. I'll say it again. This is truly the biggest secret that everybody knows is if you are avid and you dedicate to this, you will only continue to be more successful. So make sure that they understand they need to be involved in a strength training and conditioning program. Roles of those that are involved, kind of the big picture. For our coaches, they want to be a support for our athletes, for their sport. They want to encourage those students to stay involved, not only in their sport, for others. For parents, to kind of understand how we can help them grow and develop by an effective chain of command so that they're fully prepared, not only for their sport, but also outside of the sport and into the real world. And for us as administrators and staff, to be able to give effective management systems so that they can make sure that everything goes smoothly and we don't have circumstances that we have to deal with at the last moment. And these can involve scheduling and that kind of thing. We work together. We ultimately give the athlete the true best of chance of success. So in summary, student athletes, we want them to be a part of something, not only just that particular sport, but other sports and activities. To be a 3-sport athlete is something that we try to strive for, to let them be active, and more importantly, to understand some of those growth components that are so effective for later in life. So let's let those athletes and students develop great character traits, coaches to coach, and parents to be able to support their students' growth through these programs. With that, athletic programs have risks. Excuse me. All students and parents must realize that there's risks that are involved in participating in contact sports. It'll be our first priority to make sure that these student athletes are safe, and we will always lean towards that priority. Please make sure that you talk with our athletic trainer about any injury or concern that you may have. I know that there's a balancing act between that being hurt and being injured, but you need to make sure that you talk with our trainer so that we can make sure that your athlete is prepared not only for the week, but for their season. When there's an injury that occurs, allow our athletic trainer during that time to be able to evaluate, assess, and find out what's going to be the next best steps for that student athlete so that they can be successful. Understand that it's very important that we have that communication. If we don't get that communication, then what is considered a hurt or a mild injury could then lead into something much more worse. And now your student athlete is out for a much longer period. So please, if there are any ailments, any concerns, make sure your athlete communicates with our trainer. As part of that process, we do have a concussion management. This is with the Wyoming state statute. Any athlete that is exhibiting any kind of symptoms for a concussion will automatically be removed from their play and be assessed accordingly. That needs to be followed up with a licensed health care professional and then communicated with our athletic trainer. If an injury occurs and our athletic trainer does pull the student from that injury or from that play, then they need to make sure they see a healthcare professional. Only at that time, once when they are released from the healthcare professional, will we then begin to start a return to play protocol. Most times that is a 6-day return to play protocol, and we will assess according to the injuries and how well they are able to recover. Understand, again, a healthcare professional may very well release that student from that concussion, but at that time, then as a district, we will go ahead and start with our return to play protocol so that we know that the student athlete is fully prepared for their contact sport. You'll notice that we will do impact testing, which is testing, baseline testing to see where the student's cognitive abilities are at, where they maintain, so that we can have good baseline data in case they do get a concussion. This will be given for basketball, wrestling, for our pole vaulters, and for boys diving. As you know, many of you have used a sportswear online program. The one that we have is called swole123.net. This is where all of our paperwork is uploaded onto a system so that we can make sure that we have everything that they need to be able to participate. The only piece that needs to be physically handed in is their physical. And please note that the physical has to be dated after May 1st. All other paperwork that is established for them to be able to participate is set up on the sportswear123.net program. You'll need to make sure that you go on there. If your student athlete is transitioning from a fall sport to a winter sport, all they will need to do is go in and update their status. Yes, they do need to make sure that they still get an orange card for their winter sport. Any sport that they transition from, they always have to get a new orange card. This orange card verifies that they've got all of their required paperwork handed in properly, and it lets the coach know that, in fact, this student athlete is prepared to go ahead and start practices. If they do not have their orange card, they cannot practice. You will notice that there are times and dates available, 3 to 4 p.m., the rest of this week, down in the training room, that our trainer will be there to be able to take care of all of your paperwork. Please make sure that you get this taken care of so that when your winter sport starts, you have all of this done. Again, if you do not have your paperwork done in time, you will not be able to practice. Some key points from the handbook. New starting last year, so it's still part of a process that's new because we didn't fully finish all of our seasons last year. You must be in attendance for all of your classes in order to practice. Okay? Understand that there are exceptions, extenuating circumstances that are approved by myself, and if you have been faculty excused. When we're talking about game days, you have to be in all of your classes the day of competition in order to be able to compete. If you have a competition that you leave before classes start on that day, then you have to be in all of your classes the day before. For instance, if you have a competition on a Friday and you leave at 7 o'clock that morning, then you will need to have been in all of your classes the day before on that Thursday to be able to travel. Okay? Understand that this has to be done for attendance purposes. Any absences whether it be a doctor's appointment on a game day, or maybe there's job shadowing or something like that, needs to be pre-approved by myself before that can occur. Do not just assume that because it's a doctor's appointment that it will be exempt. Please get prior approval. What you will need to do is you can either email me, contact the activities office, get in touch with me, let me know when the scheduled appointment is. I'll go ahead and let you know what time that appointment they can check out. Then they'll need to make sure they go to their appointment. Very important that they bring a note back verifying that they were at their appointment, check back in, go to the rest of their classes, and if all of that is done, then they will be eligible to go ahead and participate. Also notice that there could be additional coaches' rules given in regard to their head coaches' training rules on attendance. Other information in regard to the handbook: overnight stays. Any overnight stay that we have for the winter is subject to bag equipment checks. This is part of policy. Please prepare your athletes to note that their bags will be checked if they're having an overnight stay. We do not allow practices to last over 3 hours. This has to be approved by myself if there is a case and an extenuating circumstance. That includes contact with the student athletes to the end. For instance, you cannot have a meeting for an hour and a half and then have practice for 2 hours. That would be over the 3-hour limit. So the second you have contact with your student athletes till the end cannot be over 3 hours. For those students that are online classes, and we'll talk more about this with regard to eligibility, but you are required to make sure that you are passing your previous semester as well as handing in weekly grades for your college classes. There's a couple of ways that we'll be able to go through this, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Finally, we need to make sure that all of our student athletes have had prior permission to be able to travel for their competition. You'll need to make sure that you get on the district website. You go on there on the main page, and then under student registration, you'll click on that, and then you can go under new students or returning students, and you fill out all the information there so that we can make sure that it is verified that they can in fact travel. If this is not done, they cannot travel. So please make sure this is taken care of. Points of emphasis from the Wyoming High School Activities Association: student athletes are only allowed 8 semesters of competition based on when they entered their high school. So they do not get an extra if all of a sudden they started participating as a junior high student for some reason. Their eligibility would start right then, and they would get 8 semesters. If they continued throughout, they would not be able to go ahead and participate their senior year. Make sure you understand that. Students must be amateur athletes. If there's any of them that have received any kind of professional status, they will not be able to compete at the high school level. Cannot compete on an independent team. For clarity, yes, being on a city league basketball team is considered an independent team, and that would be a Wyoming High School activities violation. We cannot recruit. This is very fortunate. We're the sole high school in this district, so that becomes not much of an issue. However, we want to make sure that that does not become the case. Any new student that has competed in Wyoming last year, you need to make sure that you come and see me. You've got eligibility requirements that we need to make sure that you are not violating. You can only compete in one sport at a time, so you cannot participate in multiple sports for the same season, and obviously you cannot participate in a college or university team. Requirements for participation: you must have insurance. If you do not have insurance, please get with my secretary, Mrs. Duchamp. She will get you the information so that you can be properly insured. It's just at a very inexpensive cost. Any homeschooled student, you must see me before participating in any activity. That includes practice. If you are a homeschooled student that you are interested in participating in activities at Rock Springs or athletics at Rock Springs High School, you need to make sure that you see me so that we can make sure that you have the proper paperwork with the homeschool or school combination agreement. Each coach will make sure and ask you this on the very first day of practice. Again, you cannot practice, let alone compete, if you are a homeschooled student and you do not have the paperwork handed in. Cannot be 20 years old before the age of, or before August 1st. And we'll talk eligibility a little bit more here in a little bit. Must have 3.0 credits currently and from the previous semester. Rock Springs High School Athletics and Activities Department does have a student code of conduct. With this, there is a higher expectation for students being a part of activities and athletics. Such violations can go ahead and have consequences that can include probation, suspension, as well as dismissal from the team or any other action that seems fitting based on the seriousness of the violation. In support of that, we also have an alcohol, tobacco, and drug abuse policy. You'll notice here that if any student athlete does violate those, there are first, second, and third violations. First violation is a 60-day activity suspension. They can still practice, but they cannot perform during those 60 days. Second violation, it's a 1-year calendar suspension from the moment of the violation. Cannot practice or attend team functions. Third violation, cannot participate in athletics for the remainder of your secondary education career. Notice in bold there, electronic media does constitute evidence of alcohol, tobacco, and drug possession or use. Mitigation of penalties. We do have a student assistance program. With that student assistance program, if you agree and successfully complete the student assistant program, your violations will be mitigated based on first, second, and third violations. You'll notice first violation will mitigate down to 10 activity suspensions or 20% of the contest performances or events for that activity that they're actively involved in. You'll notice that it cannot exceed over 5 total competitions. There also is a research assignment of that violation that has occurred. Second violation will mitigate from 1 full year down to 60 activity suspension. And then your third violation would go from not being able to compete for the rest of your high school down to 1 calendar year. If it's a fourth, you will not be able to compete for the rest of your high school career. As stated before, social media does play a very, very important factor in athletics and activities. It can be a wonderful avenue of communication. It can also become a student athlete's worst enemy. Notice, life is 10% of what happens to us, 90% is how we react to it. Notice here, this particular article talks about some students that were being actively recruited by some college coaches. Those college coaches went ahead and got on their Twitter feed. They looked on their Twitter and their parents' Twitter feed and found out that these students were not the example that they wanted to represent their program and therefore lost their opportunity to be able to compete or perform at the next level. Weekly eligibility. We will pull eligibility every week at the beginning of the week. Once that eligibility is reported, I will send it to the coaches to review. Any student athlete that has less than 3.0 credits will be ineligible for that week. The student athlete will have until the following day at noon to get that class or classes up to make sure that they're eligible for the week. Anything after that, it will not count and they will not be able to compete for that week. Please remember that a lack of effort on the student's part does not require extra work on our teachers. If the student athlete all of a sudden goes to the teacher and says, hey, I'm ineligible this week. Here are 6 of my assignments. I need these graded by tomorrow at noon. That may very well not happen, and that student athlete will be ineligible. So please make sure that you stay on top of your grades. Student taking college classes will have to verify their weekly college grades and that they're passing as well. This can be done by a screenshot of their grade or a printout or even an email to the activities office to verify that they're passing. We need these each week It is just not verification that you're taking the course, but your weekly grade will need to be reported. Remember, student first, athlete second. Start of the season, practices. Boys and girls basketball and wrestling will start on November 23rd. There will be no practices Thursday through Sunday. This is a Wyoming High School Activities Association rule. First competition can be December 10th. For boys swimming, first practice is November 30th. A week later, first competition again will be December 10th. For indoor track and field, first practice is scheduled for January 4th. First competition will be January 14th. Each day can only count as one practice. So if your coach is having 2-a-days, those 2 practices still only count as one practice during that time frame before the first competition. Tiger Proud fundraising policy. Very important that you do understand we do have a fundraising program. It is in the works. Unfortunately, with COVID, we have not been able to do much with it. The important thing that we need to understand with regard to fundraising, whether it be through a parent committee or through the program and the head coach's program, they have to be pre-approved first. You cannot just start a fundraiser and then all of a sudden expect that to be done or finished and completed. It has to be pre-approved by us. Part of the reason for that is to make sure that we don't have multiple groups that are competing against each other for the same type of fundraiser. All of those programs will only be given 3 fundraisers for the 2021 school year. And also understand that any non-school group requiring the collection of money will be encouraged to keep the money separate from the school. If it's got any representation of the school, their logo, the name, Rock Springs Tiger basketball, or anything like that is considered part of our program, and that funding needs to be pre-approved and done through us. Also notice that any donations over $1,000 must be accepted and approved by the superintendent or the board. So if we receive any of those, please let us know. We can submit it to the central office for approval. Along with activities, we want to make sure that our student athletes are able to go ahead and work through conflict. We know that this occurs, and we want to make sure that we have a proper chain of command for how this happens. You'll notice here, if there is a conflict, question, student athlete has a concern, please encourage them to communicate with their coach. Allow them to be able to have the opportunity to explain themselves, to communicate and talk. 9 times out of 10, it's a miscommunication, and having the student athlete go up and talk to the coach gives very good clarity to the situation. If that still doesn't work, then have the athlete, coach, and administrator communicate and see if we can work out the difference of whatever that may be. Finally, parent, coach, and administrator, as well as the student athlete, are involved. This is never after a sporting event. It's always in advance, and make sure that we communicate, set up a time to be able to meet, and it's not a conversation about playing time or coaching philosophy. Sportsmanship expectations. As the Wyoming High School Activities Association has established, they call it Join the Ride, which involves respect, integrity, dedication, and encouragement for being involved in the event. We want the administrators to set up the standard for which we want that sportsmanship to follow. Coaches, they'll be the beacon that's going to go ahead and establish this within their program and be that positive role model. For the spectators, we want your voice to represent the program in a positive way and not negatively about or towards officials, coaches, or even other players. Participants, you're the reason everyone's there to be able to go ahead and compete with class. And then finally, our officials, they're going to be the ones that are going to help hold and establish those guidelines within the game itself. One of those things that we have is called the infamous yellow card. This yellow card, if your behavior is inappropriate at an event, we will issue this to you, giving you your warning. Any behavior that exceeds outside of that, then will require maybe dismissal from the event. But this is the yellow card that we will use to make sure that you understand that your behavior is not acceptable at the event. Forms of communication. We use basically 4 big forms. The first one, Twitter. This one's to kind of use for celebration of activities that they have. Facebook. This is a big form of communication that we have. If there's any changes in events. And we also use 4aconference.org for scheduling. Please note that this is not etched in stone, but this is a great resource, especially involving these times with COVID. Schedules can and will probably change. So please look at 4aconference.org. Notice that that's not etched in stone, but we will use that as our form of communication regarding scheduling. Finally, Parent Square. This is probably one of our best forms of communication. This goes out to all the students. They can be set up by groups for their individual sports. This is going to be the main form of communication set up by our coaches. You'll notice that we do not have individual breakout sessions that are set up at the high school. Coaches are going to go ahead and meet with their athletes virtually to make sure that they understand everything in regard to their expectations on that first day of practice. That already explains what I just discussed there. Finally, this is a wrap up. Please note at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about there's a presentation link, acknowledgement link that you have, in fact, watched this video. You'll notice right there, it's a Google form that you will need to fill out. It does have a couple of questions that are in reference to the presentation. You fill that out. We get that information. We verify with the student athlete that us participating that this has been done. So please make sure that you save that link, click on it, fill out the form so that we can verify that you have, in fact, watched this presentation. It is our collective effort to make sure that we have all involved to serve our philosophy and mission, student athletes being involved in multiple activities and sports so that they can become well-rounded, successful citizens in society. We want to make sure that along with that, we provide a quality education for our students. It's such an essential piece towards their education. And thank you for watching. Have a good night.